Hi there. This is my reaction video for House of the Dragon Season 1, Episode 6, The Princess and the Queen. I'm going to cover this by going through the top 7 most notable points from the episode, both good and bad, because 7's a nice solid number. As you'll have noticed, this wasn't an immediate reaction. I'm recording it Friday night, even though it's supposed to be a same night immediate reaction. I officially had technical problems that I've been relying on the HBO Max browser-based streaming service through my laptop, and that thing froze on me until well after midnight, at which point I said, screw it, I'll download the HBO Max app for iPhone, and that worked great. At the same time, the website was still frozen. Not slowed, not the audio isn't matching up, I mean frozen, and it still was Monday morning. That was starting to be a problem around episode 3, but problem you want to have as the show has been getting more popular and more people are watching live. It was slowing down. It officially became impossible to watch over their streaming website, live anyway. It works by like Wednesday, Thursday. Too much traffic. But I've identified the specific problem. It's just to get a sense of the story, I'll make the sacrifice and watch on a tiny iPhone screen so I can make an immediate reaction. And then for examining, screenshots, zooming in on little details, I'm doing that throughout the week anyway on my specific analysis videos. So for the next 4 episodes of the season, I will be having same night reactions because I'm not going to wait on a crashing website anymore. I'll use the iPhone app, work that out. So sorry for the delay. On top of that, I said I started a new job, so I couldn't do this rest of the week because I'm really scrambling to get ready for that. That will clear up in the coming weeks, but for right now, the one time I had to make this was Sunday night, and it got delayed due to technical problems. Won't repeat again. I'll use the iPhone version. Now, I have had time to watch through other reviews of this, particularly the Preston Jacobs live screen, and he brought up some points. And generally, I agree that on its own, this episode was good, but there were time skip problems, which are more of a season scale problem than an immediate this episode problem. Because point 1 is, out of my 7 here, is Criston Cole faced no consequences for killing Joffrey Lonmouth at the wedding feast. If you haven't read the books, in the books he kills him at the wedding tournament. There's a melee. They say we're going to have 7 days of feasting in tournament games. It isn't murder to kill someone in a tournament if you just beat him really hard. This was different, and it raises those problems. And I'm concerned about that, but I spent a lot of time in my last video yelling about that because I said, book fans know this is a problem. Screeners went out through episode 6, so people had already told us there are no consequences for this. And I said at the time, last video, everyone else will be upset about this when episode 6 happens, but I know about it in advance. But I've already talked about it, so I'm not going to devote that much more time to it. I'm trying to keep this short because the first time I recorded it, it was an hour long. So I'm going to split this off into smaller videos. So you'll hear me say more than once, I'm making a separate video on this. I'm going to make a separate video about the time skip issues. And overall, I'll tell you now, it isn't laziness, it's they were fighting with HBO to even get half of the season with the younger cast members. HBO wanted it more condensed than this. I don't blame Ryan Condal and his writing staff. They were the ones fighting for this. When they originally proposed this under Carly Rae in 2017, it would have started with the Civil War beginning upon Viserys' eventual death, and we wouldn't have gotten any of this set up. They had to fight tooth and nail for this. It was really hard. So it's not an oversight. It's, yes, the refrain everyone is saying is, well, this should have been 2 seasons. Tell me in the comments if you remember a full year ago when I was speculating on this needs to be 2 seasons, the Rogue Prince novella, The Reign of Viserys I, and I said, around the middle, maybe at the wedding, you need to split it. And what's other stuff we could do? And my idea was show what the other great houses are doing, show what Cregan Stark is doing in his youth, show Jane Arryn, just to pad out 2 full seasons. And I think they could have done that, but the network wouldn't have let them do it. That's a studio problem, not a writer problem. They are aware of it. So the issue is, this isn't a mistake that's going to repeat where they just plain forget things. They didn't have a choice. And I think you could fix it with this, what they say, hang a lampshade, have a stray line in season 2, or even a flashback. They've discussed maybe they'll come back for flashbacks, where they go like one line, oh yeah, Kristen would have been arrested if Alicent hadn't put in a word for him because he's her ally now, and they make up some token excuse of, Joffrey Lonmouth pulled a knife on Rhaenyra and everyone knows it's a lie. Something like that. I'm going to make a whole video about the time skip issues. It's a studio problem. It's not the writers. They were fighting to get more material, and this is the best they could do. I've been one of the people saying, oh man, we need to split 2 seasons. This was a dead franchise. Remember how people had no support for this, even like a week before the premiere episode, because they had not been paying attention to the behind-the-scenes stuff doing pretty well, and then went, wow, look how good this is. In retrospect, yeah, it should have been 2 seasons. But the studio was very hesitant. I don't even think they were bad for hesitating. It's really hard to recast. We're going to do it like The Crown, where we recast after 1 season. But it's just the difficulty of getting that on screen. So yes, there are issues with the time skip. And I'll say that more than once throughout this, just to rush along, that's a time skip issue, not a this episode issue. Now, in keeping with that, though, points 2, 3, and 4 are adult Rhaenyra and Alicent's children, then Rhaenyra and Daemon's children. That's points 2 through 4 out of this. To start with, on the adult Rhaenyra and Alicent, it's nice that Ryan Condal and Miguel Sapochnik, separately, they're not in the same room, at different interviews and the behind-the-scenes things, they both say at different points, behind the scenes, we were referring to this as the second pilot. And the fact that they're saying it at different points, that no, they were really calling it that behind the scenes officially, that this is relaunching the story, they internally considered it the start of a new season, because they were calling it the second pilot. It should have been the start of a new season. And I like what they said, that Miguel Sapochnik said that opening tracking shot, the opening oneer shot, was not in the script, but he argued to everyone that because it's the second pilot, people aren't invested in adult Rhaenyra yet, and adult Laenor, so to keep everyone, emotionally in there, don't take the camera, don't shift to other scenes. So there's like a almost 6 minute oneer shot. It's actually 2 3-minute ones that it breaks when Laenor comes in the door. I think that was pretty smart of them. They just keep them invested, don't cut to other characters. They said, we stay with them, even after the oneer shot ends. Normally we'd, for pacing reasons, cut to other scenes, but we stay with Rhaenyra, then her father, then Alicent, then Rhaenyra to her sons. So you stay with Rhaenyra, story-wise, for a good 15 minutes. Then they cut to her sons at the dragon pit, but then again, dragons are cool, so I think that keeps everyone invested. They said we wanted to keep everyone invested for the first 20 minutes, and great focus went into making the first 20 minutes engaging. There was no pauses. It goes from 15 minutes on Rhaenyra to her sons in the dragon pit, which shifts to Aemon. From Aemon, we go back to Alicent, and then we see her daughter. So the Rhaenyra Alicent group, that's 20 minutes of that before you then cut to other characters in the Red Keep or Daemon and Pentos. They devoted attention to that because they knew this is reintroducing everyone. I think they did a good job with that. And when I say the camera stays on them, just quickly, camera work stuff, you've heard me repeatedly criticize the cinematography on Game of Thrones because I realized it was a symptom of the wider problem that Benioff and Weiss were destroying the show for the sake of celebrity actors mugging concerned face in tight close-ups. That when you realize they say we're doing it for these performances and these faces, like shallow hype fans themselves, they think if Cersei's making a concerned face at the camera in tight close-up, this is storytelling. When it isn't storytelling, there's no dialogue, so it's not screenplay. It isn't acting because Lena Headey herself was privately complaining, I should be doing more than this. This isn't acting. My character wouldn't be just glaring at people. I should be crying. They overruled her. And it's not cinematography. that not me, like the head of HBO would tell them the failed pilot was there's no wide shots in it. It's just a bunch of goddamn close-ups on the actors' faces. Problems they had in the pilot that continued through season 8 because they'd overrule decades of experienced directors. They would overrule. Now, I have been working on a cinematography series for how House of the Dragon is different, and I kept saying before this will look very different because they're not being micromanaged by two idiots who don't know the goddamn thing about cinematography. And just how infuriating it is when people go, but the visuals and cinematography were so amazing in Battle of the Bastards. No, they weren't. In late Game of Thrones, like, this is the opposite of cinematography. This is a lot of expensive, like, they went to the expense of hiring 70 horses, and then in terms of filmed them very poorly. Except there's one or two times where the directors managed to fight to get real camera work in there. But overall, it's just a bunch of static shots, and what everything season 8 was what they were trying to make it look like the whole time. And it's a symptom of, I want tight close-ups on the lead actors' faces. And I always point this out because it's all one interrelated problem. That even though there is a 6-minute long oneer shot, it isn't just a 6-minute tight close-up on their faces, and for that matter, sometimes the camera pans off of them. Like, it pans, it swivels to show they're talking to Lord Caswell, it shows the corridor they're walking through, that it'll turn to a handmaid while Rhaenyra is getting dressed, she's off camera, so it isn't purely to show off the actors. It's a oneer shot, and it's in the room, but it moves between people. This is how you're supposed to do a oneer shot. It's not a vanity shot pandering Kit Harington for Golden Globes. Now, I say this, and I go into much detail on this, because, in conclusion here, what really struck me is Ryan Condal said in the behind-the-scenes videos, because this is the second pilot, from here on out, the visual tone will drift away from what Game of Thrones did. Wow, because here I've been ranting about how the first 5 episodes look very different from Game of Thrones, that they have actual camera movement, how they didn't desaturate all the colors with poor lighting, but no, it looks like real camera work from another show. And here he's saying you haven't seen anything yet. That was us when we were one hand tied behind our back, trying to bridge from the look of Game of Thrones to now very different camera work. Now, this episode didn't have quite as much because it's mostly a dialogue-heavy episode. Even so, that the showrunner is saying in as many words, if you were impressed by the first 5 episodes, from now on it will drift even more from what Game of Thrones did. Very encouraging. So I devoted a lot of focus to that. Sorry, I'm like 12 minutes into this, but again, I'll talk about this more in other videos, but in terms of shifting to the adult versions, I think they nailed it. Again, as they stress, we cast the adult version first, then cast the younger version based on them, so they didn't replace them. It's you're matching the younger one to the older one, not the other way around. And, it has been 10 years. People change in 10 years. For Rhaenyra, I think they really nailed it, that she's haggard from everything, that all the stress of everything, that she isn't the rebellious young teenager anymore. She's a bit haggard, a little smarter, that actually thinking through some things a bit more. The thing when they cast everyone back in December 2020 and we started looking at clips of, what are Emma Darcy and Olivia Cook like? And I've said there's like this mini fandom since 2021 for Olivia and Emma Darcy that on like the Reddit, the subreddits and stuff, people who aggressively watched everything they've done before and fell in love with these actors, that they're really good, that Emma is Rhaenyra to me, who I said it's like this female Stannis, that the way I describe Rhaenyra is haggard, but with steely resolve underneath. That not the saintly pluckiness of Daenerys, no, it's like a female Stannis. And what better way to do that than to start with, this isn't in the book, start with she's in childbirth, and then asked to send the baby in defiantly, immediately standing before the afterbirth is even out of her, defiantly walking in great pain all the way to the other side of the castle. That really nailed the tone of this, and showing off what Emma Darcy is capable of. And that cheerful, I cursed at the midwife, that deadpan humor that they have, that Emma has in some other projects, of cheerfully saying something like that. So Emma Darcy, I think, was a great fit. Olivia Cooke, I've seen some people complaining about, but in the behind-the-scenes videos, they do acknowledge, in as many words, Alicent is the character who officially changed the most in the 10-year time skip, and we have been mindful of that it is a sharp change. And I think they did show that in episode 5, that the start of it, that she's lost her innocence and naivety and become embittered and vindictive. And in 10 years, she's not the young queen anymore, the young, teenager. She is now an adult. She's been queen for longer. She's more confident, even though, her father isn't there in charge yet. And she's angry that everyone's doing stuff. But that is what Alicent is supposed to be like. At the same time, I think they showed her moments of humanity. Like, dude, everyone says Rhaenyra's children are bastards, whether they are or not, and we're not even discussing it because it's at least a possibility. And that she's bitter, but there's reasons she's like that. But then, like, when Aemond is upset that his older brother pranked him, she hugs him and loves him. That she is not Cersei. She's like a more bitter version of Marjorie and Olenna. Or like when Larry says, "I killed my father and brother," cheerfully, she is horrified. And you see more of young Alicent coming out there. So it's one episode. I wouldn't judge, I don't see any of young Alicent in there. Well, if you're judging by the first scene she's in, where she's really angry at Rhaenyra and snarking at them that her latest kid also doesn't look like Laenor, episode as a whole, I see bits of younger Alicent in there. I think she's great. Some people saying they didn't match. They admit she changed a lot in the past 10 years because of plot elements that were clear, that time has passed. I'm fine with both of them. I really like them. I think they're going places with this. Moving on to their children. Basically, if you're overwhelmed by all of this, there's two sides which have 4 children on each. The Alicent's side has 4 children you need to know. She has 4 children. The 4th child, Daeron, hasn't shown up yet, but I made videos saying we've heard they'll establish in dialogue he exists by the end of Season 1. Like Season 1, Stannis was off-screen, but they mention him to establish he exists. So there's 4 children on Alicent's side. And then the anti-Alicent side is Rhaenyra and Daemon. Daemon has 2 daughters, and Rhaenyra has 2 sons that you need to remember, Jace and Luke, who are fully realized characters with their own personalities. Like, she has younger children. This isn't her last child, but like Joffrey and there's 2 others that'll come. They're small children, that they're setting them up for the next prequel era. They're like Rick and Stark, or Tommen and Myrcella. You only really need to know 4 of them. Baela, Rhaena, Jace, and Luke. And the other side has 4 you need to... So 4 and 4, it's not that many. Yes, there will be 5 children on Rhaenyra's side in total. 5 by Rhaenyra plus Baela and Rhaena is 7, but you really only need to know 4. Starting with Alicent's children, I already said Daeron will show up later. Aemon does more next episode. We'll talk about that then. And Helena, they've changed a bit from the books. Her daughter is like that in the book. It's not a complete change. They basically went, what if she was like her daughter too? And the Chronicle just didn't mention it. So I'm going to devote a whole other video to that. But focusing on Aegon for now, and the things they said about this specific episode, I like in the behind-the-scenes stuff, they actually say, Sarah Hess says this, a big theme of this episode is parents passing on their conflicts to their children in generational conflict. And this happened before a couple episodes ago, where the theme of this episode, for like the Hunt episode, is this other thing of doubt. And the theme of this one is passing things on to your children. Wow, themes again. Not some half-assed one-hit wonder book author going, themes are for 8th grade book reports. I'm not disgusted that Benioff said that. I'm disgusted he'd say that in interviews and the moderator would laugh when, like, this is a literary panel. What the hell? That it's because he said it in a friendly way, but that is not a night. Why aren't you remarking on how weird that is? But these people I think that's why I wonder if they're making it a point to say that each episode has a theme, and they're not just pulling it out of their ass. It really is a theme that you can see in it. Like doubt, or In this one, the theme, like Brian Cogman would go, the theme of season 2 is romance. That isn't a theme. But this one is a theme of passing conflict, generational conflict on to children. Focusing on young Aegon here, Ryan Condal said this in a different interview, that he said a big point we have is that Aegon II is not the new Joffrey. Joffrey was a born psychopath. He isn't. That Joffrey, like in the books, they say he was like carving up pregnant kitchen cats to get to the fetuses inside. That no, Ryan Condal said that Aegon, he's a bit indolent and lazy and, an upper-class brat, but you get the sense that if he was raised by other people, he'd be halfway decent, or at least non-threatening. That he's not a born monster like Joffrey was, that you will see that he is a big theme of the show is parents shaping their children into that. And that's from the books, actually, that's at the Joffrey wedding to Marjorie, Tyrion thinking on how people pass down generational conflicts, and on it goes. My one issue is, and I'll make a separate video on this, that adult Aegon should be convinced the throne is his. That this is the start of a character arc paralleling. That just as young Alicent was innocent and her father Otto impressed on her, it's not a matter of, oh, well, I won't challenge Rhaenyra. The fact that you have children, this is the challenge, and you have to accept that you're going to have to fight for the throne to survive. Now, Alicent is in turn, the adult Alicent is confronting naive young Aegon that you must seize the throne. And then his adult version, adult Aegon, will parallel adult Alicent, because he's the person she shaped him to be. There's some people who go, because of the unreliable narrator, that in the books, adult Aegon didn't even want the throne. That's the pro-Aegon propaganda. By the time he's an adult, he does want it. It is right to show that, as a teenager, he was like, what, so I won't challenge her, and he's harmless. That he's what Alicent turns him into. But I hope we see that after the final time skip by the end of the season. There's going to be another 6-year time skip between episodes 7 and 8 to show that the adult him, through her parenting, has turned into that. Point 4 of 7, Rhaenyra and Daemon's children. Starting with her children, I think it's a mistake that they pretty much openly say that they're Harwin Strong's children. In the books, it's ambiguous, and it's more interesting when it's ambiguous. I saw Preston Jacobs' review said pretty much the same thing, that it was more interesting when they presented it as ambiguous of, they didn't set up these other elements from the books that, mention, Rhaenyra's maternal grandfather was an Arryn, and Laenor's mother, Rhaenys, is half Baratheon. I mean, they allude to that, it's in the family tree, but they don't stress it. That, sometimes features skip a generation, which is true. That even in the books, we are not entirely sure what Martin's intention was with the boys, that maybe that's just what they ended up looking like. Possibly. And the possibility is always there, which is what makes it more interesting. You're pretty sure it's the other way. But thinking on it, and I'm making this in reaction to what Preston said, they didn't, objectively show us a DNA paternity test, now did they? They showed us that Rhaenyra and Harwin are convinced that they're Harwin's sons. Rhaenyra could be wrong. She's a character in universe. Because I've heard rumors that there's dialogue in a later episode this season where she'll say, I was trying for children with Laenor, they just all came out looking like Harwin because I was also having sex with him, so I just assume they're all Harwins. So everyone included, but that's in the books, if you think about it. It's just, they didn't present the other ambiguous elements of, maybe they look like the Baratheon grandmother. But maybe this is the first episode where they want to stress everyone believes they're Harwins. Maybe they're setting this up for a twist later, that there'll be a point where Rhaenyra goes, actually, I was having sex with both of them, and I don't know, but I was convinced they were Harwins. So they might be playing around with that in the TV show, but I don't know if we necessarily got the last word on it. That, TV has to be simplified because it's shorter, I get that, but they're stressing They're Harwins. That is that clip going around from the comedy thing of that is not a light-skinned baby, that is a white Slavic baby. The joke thing was going on Twitter from a comedy thing. Maybe they'll introduce the ambiguity later, but I'm going to devote whole videos to this of maybe, maybe not. I think the child actors in this were great. I like the one J scene where it's, oh my god, I'm a bastard. Because, it's hard to find good child actors. These kids are all good. I mean, most of what they're going to do is in episode 7 from what we've seen in the previews. This is just introducing them. But I like them here. I wish they played up the ambiguity more, but then again, Rhaenys hasn't reacted to them yet. Maybe they'll have a line next episode where Rhaenys goes, well, I'm half Baratheon. Who knows? We haven't seen everything yet. As for Daemon's daughters, Baela and Laena, they're nice. This ties into, again, separate video on, we didn't get to see them too much due to the time skip, them and adult Laena. That is a time skip issue, not a this episode issue. And looking at the behind-the-scenes videos, I think they did a pretty decent job. Condell and Sarah Hess were explaining, we didn't have a lot of time for Pentos. We realized we have, 4 scenes to hit 3 or 4 story beats as, a mini short film of this marriage having problems, but we're dissatisfied here, even though materially we're doing okay. I think they did a good job with the limited time. Just wish we'd had more than this one snapshot of how did they get to Pentos like that. And there's a lot of stuff they did in the time skip. They traveled through all of the free sea. There's a lot I'm going to talk about with that. Baela and Laena, one slight difference is in the books, they're twins, but they're not identical twins. Like Jaime and Cersei aren't identical, of course. They're not like Tyland and Jason. And Baela was always the older twin, so in this they said they're a year apart. Whatever, that's more practical. People would get confused by their twins, but they're fraternal, not identical. Whatever, they were nice. Despite the time limits, I like that we at least got one scene, one-on-one character building scene, between Laena and her daughter, one of her daughters with Rhaena. So we got that in there. I'd also point out that if you think of, I call it the racial Bechdel test, that it wasn't until season 4 that Game of Thrones had 2 black characters talking to each other alone in a one-on-one scene. When Missandei's talking to Grey Worm, it's just, oh, that never really happened before. Because there's only so many POVs in the books, that this was, oh look, a black woman talking to her black daughter, and the racial Bechdel test, and on top of that, the female Bechdel test, if you think about it, one-on-one, 2 women talking about, well, I don't have a dragon egg yet, but I did when I didn't, the egg that they gave her didn't hatch, that she had to claim an adult one, and she claimed Vagar. She says she claimed her when she was 15, which would be between the royal hunt and when Daemon comes back to court. Some people say, well, then why wasn't she around? Well, Rhaenys' dragon, Meleys, only shows up in episode 5. That doesn't mean she didn't have the dragon in episode 1. It's CGI, I get that. They're saving it for the big reveal. So I'm okay with this. And I wished we gave them more time to interact. I think that we need flashbacks or something. They did what they could. This is the wider limitation of this should have been 2 seasons. I think they did well with what time they had, and it works. This flows into 0.5 out of 7 in here. Laena's death is slightly different. She does die in childbirth in the book version, but it's her baby is stillborn, and she gets childbed fever and tries to go back to her dragon and just collapses. I was at first upset that some people would say it's gratuitous that in this version they say it's paralleling Emma Arryn, that she has a breech birth. The doctor makes it clear in her presence there is no way, she overhears, there is no way Laena is going to survive this. And Daemon's just, he isn't jumping to save the baby, he's just, I don't know. That isn't a firm no, but just he's too horrified to do anything of, well, emergency C-section or not, that Laena, realizing there's no way she's getting out of this alive, chooses to die a dragon rider's death by fire. At first I was worried people would be saying that's gratuitous, but then they had Condell, and it's important to have Sarah Hess, one of the female writers, saying behind the scenes, and the actress saying in the behind the scenes thing, the House of Dragons built thing, not the inside the episode, saying, we did this because we wanted to give Laena more agency, more control, that she's not just, oh, she died in childbirth. Having her go out on her own terms we didn't do this for gratuitous shock value. It's she dies in childbirth, taking that as a given. We wanted to give her more control over, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die a Dragon Rider's death. And accepting that she knew she would die no matter what. It's a bit of a change. I am okay with this after seeing the behind-the-scenes videos of why they did it. They weren't trying to just... When you do something like that, you need to say, whereas Benioff likes to go, oh, it's so cool that they're going, we didn't want to be gratuitous, we wanted to give her more agency. Fine. That's not an issue to me. I'm more concerned about the fact she didn't get as many scenes overall due to the time skip than that. If I had to complain about one thing, it's I want more flashbacks showing younger her in the time skip, but we know that. So, moving along here. Crud, I'm almost 30 minutes, I'm sorry. Points 6 and 7. I'll just race through this because they're little... Again, a lot of this is separate video on Alicent's Children, separate video on the time skip. A lot of stuff on my to-do list here because I'm catching up. Point 6 is the small council scene, which is actually just 3 smaller sub-points. Like, point 6A. I like that at the small council they're bringing up the Blackwood-Bracken feud yet again. They were the 2 guys who dueled each other at Storm's End in Episode 4. Because the Blackwoods are really important in the war. They would be POV characters. They're like the Starks of this. Well, not the Starks, but like they're as prominent as the Tullys, because the Tullys enter the war late because they're not sure which... They mention that the grandfather's really old and he doesn't know which side they're fighting over. Do we join Rhaenyra or Alicent? That the Blackwoods are like as prominent as like Edmure and Brynden Tully would be. That there's... like Black Alley Blackwood is the sister. There's Ben Blackwood, who's like 11. There's this whole set of Blackwood characters, and the wider issue is we hope this isn't just an Easter egg, but they're setting up that I really hope this show doesn't just last 3 to 4 seasons. When they say 3 to 4, they're hoping for 4. Now that it's a hit, this ties into that they wanted this to be 2 seasons. But now it's a hit, I think they can slow down the rate of adaptation and introduce Alicent's 4th son, Daeron the Daring. It's not just, hey, I'm a 4th son, it's he's in Old Town. So when the war breaks out, he's the viewpoint character for the entire Reach front of the war, that the southern Reach with the Hightowers sides with Alicent, but the northern Reach with the Tarleys sides against them. So there's this whole separate campaign, theater of the war, where he's on his dragon and fighting his way through the Reach. You'd cut that entire subplot if he wasn't in it. But I get the sense they're on the fence, but seeding the ground that this is something we could cut, but we'd rather set up, if we can. That they want to set up the Blackwoods. So, nice to see that. I also like how it parallels that the Blackwoods and Brackens have been feuding forever, and this is paralleling the feud between Rhaenyra and Alicent, that they're passing it on to their children. It's becoming a generational thing. So good that they mentioned the Blackwood-Bracken feud. Point B from the small council, just one line here. People going, how is Viserys still alive? Well, they do address that in the books. They say he got a better doctor. Orwell is a better doctor than Mellos with his constant leechings. And they did set it up for the TV-only audience. I've seen TV-only like write-ups on TV tropes and reactors hitting on this. So I don't think it's too big of a problem. But if you haven't, they imply last episode that it's Mellos going, Orwell going, Grand Maester, I made this new mixture of herbal remedies and medical chemicals. Maybe this would be better for the king. He goes, no, my boy. A thorough leeching will always... That he got a better doctor now that Orwell is there, who actually believes in, they say it's like chemical... Think about it, that's what medicine is. It's, this homespun medicine. Well, I crushed up this plant and that's where aspirin comes from. It's a chemical from plants that mortar and pestle wise. But they say in the book that the new maester was more reliant on like tinctures and potions than a thorough leeching, and it actually helped. That for a time under the new Grand Maester, his health stabilized. I mean, obviously, like he's lost his left arm up to his elbow, but his fainting spells are gone. He looked like he was on the verge of death last episode, probably from all the blood loss. But 10 years later, he seems stable and in decent health. And he looks like he's prematurely aged, but all things considered, that he can be 10, and 10 years later, he looks halfway decent when he's meeting his grandchild, is surprising to some people. He got a better doctor. And point 6C, that also came up in the small council. Orwell replaced Mellis in the small council. He died of old age. Point C, the Stepstones War restarting. They mentioned at the small council, as well as at Pentos, that after Daemon defeats the Crab Feeder, the Triarchy is in retreat, but later they mount a counteroffensive with the Martells of Dorne. And if you look at a map, it's the Triarchy's on the east side of the Stepstones island chain. Dorne is on the west side, so it's harder to fight on two fronts. Now, in the books, this gap between when they counterattack allied with Dorne, that happened 2 years later in the books, not 10 years later, so they moved around the timeline a little. I like that they mention the Martells by name. Corin Martell is the Prince of Dorne in this time period. And this is the first time they're really bringing up that prominently in dialogue that Dorne is still an independent kingdom in this time period, or principality. Dorne is not part of the Targaryen realm. And they've been negotiating with them, but it failed. That it's nice to hear them mentioned by name, and they don't come in the story yet, but it would be nice if we get cameos by the Martells in like season 2 or something, just negotiating with them to show the Martells done the right way and not the farce we got from season 5 onwards. Wouldn't that be something? But it's like the prequel era after the Dance of the Dragons, Corin's daughter Alejandra, she is a major character who has many storylines interacting with the other ones. I don't know if they'll set up Corin's daughter yet. They haven't even shown him on screen, but here's hoping. Oh, look, they mentioned the Martells doing plot-relevant things, even though they're off-screen. Oh, and though they don't mention him by name, when Laenor's going, oh, it's so silly, there's this, unlike the crab feeder, who's this grayscale-ridden guy torturing people with crabs, their new commander, their new general, Captain General, is this 6.5-foot tall giant of a man with a huge beard dyed bright purple who charges into battle wearing women's frocks. And smile at. They don't say his name. That's Recalio Rendoon. He is a major character in the next era as well. I don't know if they're going to cut him. He wouldn't show up in season 2, but he's just this utterly flamboyant rogue. I think the only person who could have played him is Tom Baker in his prime, because he's just a madman. But Tom Baker's too old for that now. I don't know if they could get Taika Waititi to do this. And this would be like a season 5 thing with the Regency era, but just, oh, it's Recalio. I heard it's actually pronounced Resalio. It's spelled with a C, but Rendoon, no, he is a major character. That's hilarious. I think it's interesting that they have a gay man who thinks it's hilarious that another man would be a cross-dresser. That is interesting that there's, gradations within that of, well, yeah, but I don't cross-dress like that. That Rendoon, he has sex with men and women. He steals treasure only to give it away. He loves kittens but hates cats. He's very well educated but curses constantly. He's an utter madman. And I can't wait to see him on screen. But who the hell could play him? I don't know. But it was nice to see a reference to him. As Red Team Review would say, book fans were eating well this episode. We are eating, damn it. A lot of references to book lore throughout the episode. So that's point 6, was just a different small council things. The Blackwoods, Orwell is there. He's a better doctor. And the Martell Triarchy stuff, which will be an ongoing thing. That's in the background on a scale of years. And will come up again later. Point 7, I'm going to split off into another video because I don't want this to run the full hour. And I know I'm like 40 minutes into this. That the fire at Harrenhal that kills Harwin and his father Lionel. This is one of the big unreliable narrator moments from the books. I've mentioned before the unreliable narrator thing of, well, how did Rhaenyra lose her virginity, and did Corlys break up with, did Kristen break up with her, or did she break up with him? And they played around with that. This is one of those other big moments because there are 4 different and fairly well-developed theories on who set the fire at Harrenhal. And the 4 candidates are Daemon, Corlys Velaryon, Viserys himself or Larry Strong. I myself, and I've been mentioning this for over a year in my videos, tell me if you remember, I always theorized it was Larry Strong. I think even on the Wiki of Ice and Fire and Westeros.org, I wrote up the theory page and said it was probably Larry. So I'm happy with this because this is the version I thought it was. That he had the most to gain out of any of these people, that he became Lord of Harrenhal, and by freeing up the Hand of the King position, they'll make him the new Spy Master. He gets promoted to be Master of Whisperers, so he really is the new Varys. The prequel Varys, that is. So I always got the feeling it was Larys, because he's the most devious, he had the most to gain. Daemon could have done it, but why at this point? And this is one of those other things I brought up before of why the Corlys actor, Steve Toussaint, said, I read selected parts of the book, but I made it a point not to read the book. And I said, that's a good idea because of the unreliable narrator thing. That, according to one version, Corlys killed a man. In another version, he didn't. I don't think you should confuse the actor by giving him multiple versions. You should rely on, okay, in the TV universe, this is what happened. He didn't kill that guy. It was Larry. I'm going to make a longer thing about that. So this episode touched on a lot of wider issues beyond the episode itself, such as the time skip, Harrenhal, a few other things. I'm going to be making a series of videos on this. Sorry, I'm very far behind because of the new job that started up, and the technical issues, and now all this other stuff, but I'm catching up. Let's see what happens. Please tell me your thoughts on everything in the comments. I try to react to all of them.